Nothing Gold Can Stay by Robert Frost. Nature's first green is gold, her hardest hue to hold. Her early leaf's a flower, but only so an hour. Then leaf subsides to leaf, so Eden sank to grief. So dawn goes down to day, nothing gold can stay. Why did I choose this poem? This poem speaks many volumes to me. The reason I chose this poem is because one certain English teacher that shall not be named at this moment wouldn't let me do Danny O'Dare by Shel Silverstein, so I had to choose a new poem that I didn't even know anything about, and I feel that this certain English teacher should let us do any poem that we want, and it shouldn't matter if they are little kids' poems or not. Just kidding, Mrs. Bailey. Thought I'd throw in a little comedy to maybe get some style points. Anyways, there are many reasons on why I chose this awesome poem. First off, this poem uses a lot of figurative language on each and every line. I really don't like to read, but this poem is only 8 lines, so that makes me happy. It explains that even though something can be great for a long time, it will eventually end up changing. The main reason I like this poem, though, is it's in one of my favorite books, The Outsiders. Now, I know I said I don't like to read, but once I read The Outsiders, it instantly became my favorite book, and I always think of this poem when I read that book. Poem analysis. Nothing Gold Can Stay has many literary devices and figurative language throughout the entire poem. There are many words in this poem that are hard to understand, like hue and subsides. In the first line, Frost uses metaphor, as he does a lot of in the rest of the poem, to describe that seeing the season's first green leaves is like seeing gold for the first time. It also signals that seeing things when they are nice and pure like fruit. Also, in the first line, Frost uses paradox by saying green is gold. They are not the same color, but Frost compares spring's first green leaves to something as delicate and precious as gold. In the second line, Frost uses a combination of both metaphor and alliteration. He repeats the same sound 4 times in the same line by saying, her hardest hue to hold. This suggests that even though things are pure and lively, it is very difficult for them to stay that way. At the same time, Frost uses metaphor by comparing the leaves and how long they can stay alive. The third line, like the first one, uses paradox. Her early leaf's a flower, is saying things seem better than what they actually are. Even though the first leaf of the season is quite beautiful, it is not a flower, and has no comparison to one. The fourth line of the poem describes the lifespan of the leaf. It is saying even though a new green leaf is beautiful, that time that it stays alive is much too short. The poem suggests that the season is shifting or changing. It starts off in March, where the leaf blooms, and then as time passes, and it becomes autumn, and the leaf loses its color and life. The fifth line of the poem says that the leaf is just another regular leaf. By saying then leaf subsides to leaf, meaning that the magnificent leaf is just another leaf and will eventually die just like every other leaf. The sixth line of the poem uses allusion to refer to something historical and biblical. So Eden sank to grief refers to when Adam and Eve were both in the Garden of Eden, and God told them not to eat the fruit from the tree, and they disobeyed God, and then God proceeded to curse both Adam and Eve for the rest of their lives. So when Frost says, so Eden sank to grief, it refers to the death of a leaf as one of the saddest things to watch and hear about. The seventh line describes the time that the leaf is dead. It says, so dawn goes down to day, meaning that the death of the leaf is short-lived and winter will fly by like a day flies by from sunrise to sunset. Also in this line, Frost uses alliteration and metaphor by comparing the amount of time the leaf lived and the amount of time it's dead, and by using dawn, down, and day in the same line. The eighth and final line is both the title of the poem and it shows a sign of things to come. It says, nothing gold can stay. And that means no matter how long something is good for, it will eventually change and never be the same. The last line also uses foreshadowing by suggesting that the once dead leaf will be born again and go through the process of life that was just described in the poem. About the author. Robert Lee Frost was born on March 26, 1874 in San Francisco, California, to his father, William Frost, a journalist and an ardent Democrat, and his mother, Isabel Moody. He moved to Lawrence, Massachusetts under the patronage of his grandfather, William Frost. He then later attended Dartmouth College for 2 months, which was long enough to be accepted into the Theta Delta Chi fraternity. In 1894, he sold his first poem, My Butterfly, an elegy, for $15. He would go on to write hundreds of other poems in his lifetime. Even though his poetic life was a huge success, his personal life was plagued with grief and loss. His father died of tuberculosis in 1885 when he was just 11 years old. His mother died in 1900 of cancer. In 1920, he had to commit his younger sister to a mental hospital, where she died 9 years later. Robert Frost and his wife had 6 children together. Son Elliot died in 1904 from cholera. Son Carol died in 1940 because of suicide. Daughter Marjorie died in 1934 because of a fever suffered at birth, and daughter Eleanor died 3 days after birth in 1907. Only daughters Leslie and Irma lived longer than Frost did. Frost's wife also died in 1938 because of heart failure. Eventually, on January 29, 1963, Frost died of a heart attack at Peter Bent Brigham Hospital.